Whoa, Mario Kart World is way more open than we thought. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today I'm going to be talking about how Mario Kart World is actually rather open and in more ways than perhaps a lot of people have been thinking. And there is so much information going around about this game between the Switch 2 Direct, the Mario Kart World Direct, all the trailers, the Switch 2 Treehouse events, the Switch 2 Experience events, all these different press events, the different website updates. There's so much information about this game that is out there, and we have certainly been able to observe, discover, and learn so much about this game. And yet, with all that information out there, I still don't think we have a true understanding of this game quite yet. I don't think we're going to get the truest, fullest understanding of this game until we've been playing it for some time. I think this is one of those games that we won't really start to see just how crazy, incredible it is until we've had our hands on it and we've been playing through it, getting acquainted with the world of Mario Kart World, and coming to a fuller understanding of it, and perhaps even years later, some secrets will still be discovered. Consider this for a moment. While we do have a lot of footage about this game and we've seen so many different angles of this game from all the different events, most of that footage is of different people playing the events either at the Switch 2 Experience events or the press events, and it's only been at most 100cc. But perhaps an even bigger deal is smart steering. Smart steering has been on for all of these different events, and smart steering doesn't allow you to go off the track. But as a result, it is one of the reasons why I've never really liked smart steering, is that it holds you back from truly exploring these tracks and finding out all the different secrets and shortcuts they have. And so as a result, all these different experiences of Mario Kart World have been greatly limited. And when it comes to the Treehouse team and what they've played, they're trained to only show us so much. And of course, Nintendo's not going to reveal every little thing about this game before launch, but there's actually quite a few things about this game that I think people don't have a full understanding of yet, and I want to break down various ways how Mario Kart World is perhaps a lot more open than you have been thinking. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches on June 5th. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So first thing I'd like to point out here about the openness of Mario Kart World is something that I don't think many people have been paying attention to. And that's because there were 4 different Treehouse segments for Mario Kart World that followed the Switch 2 Direct. And this was actually seen in the least viewed Treehouse segment, the 4th one that had a focus on game chat. There was something I saw during this segment that I thought was a very big deal. So as you see here, what you're looking at is 2 different Switch 2s on 2 different screens playing Mario Kart World in split screen while they're in a lobby waiting to start a game. And it's explained that what's being played here is a version of free roam. Now you might be wondering, why is this a big deal? Well, let me also point out that during the Mario Kart World Direct, Nintendo finally showed off 4-player split screen, and we've seen from the footage that it is only running at 30 frames per second. And for those that don't know, on any YouTube video that's running at 60 frames per second, you can actually go to your keyboard, the comma and period buttons where you see the 2 arrows, and go left and right to go frame by frame. And if you are able to click 1 frame at a time and see that it's updating each time on a 60 FPS video, guess what? That is a 60 FPS video. But if you're looking at a game trailer or footage of a game and you're doing this and you see it only updates every other time, that means it's running at 30 frames per second. And so during this split screen gameplay of the 4 players during the Mario Kart World Direct, it only updates every other time, meaning it's only running at 30 frames per second. They slash the frame rate of the game when you're playing 4 players, which is something that's pretty commonplace amongst games that do have split screen. This is not anything too new. And while of course I was hoping for more, at the end of the day, split screen gameplay is a dying breed. So considering everything that's going on with this game, I suppose that's something I would be okay with when it comes to 4-player split screen. But 2-player split screen we have seen runs at 60 FPS, totally fine, there are no issues. It's perfect normal Mario Kart gameplay even with 2 players on 1 console. But you see, the reason why this split screen gameplay in free roam mode is a big deal is because it's not just during the tracks, but in the open world environment, you have 2 different players on one console in free roam mode, meaning you have access to this open world and it's still running at 60 frames per second. To run an open world game from 2 different players at 60 frames per second, that's actually pretty impressive, and I was not sure free roam would be available in split screen. Now they do say this is a form of free roam mode, it's not exactly the normal free roam mode, and what I have noticed is that in normal free roam mode you actually have access to this mini-map that's a top-down view of the environment that's also in 3D, it's not just a 2D image. It has depth, and so it's there to help you find different secrets in the world, which then has me wondering, could perhaps this other version of free roam mode, where it's for split screen when you're waiting around for different races and such, might this world be more limited than just not having a minimap? I think getting rid of that sophisticated minimap might make it a little bit easier to run the game in split screen at 60 FPS in the open world environment, but this does also mean all the little extra challenges and secrets to find the world are also not there for split screen free roam. Well, if you look at this footage, we actually can see one of the question mark panels that you can hit in normal free roam mode, so I'm going to assume that this is probably still going to be there. Now, will that extend to the challenges and medallions as well? Possibly, but I haven't seen any confirmation of that as of yet. Regardless, I'm excited to see that we're going to have some form of split screen free roam, which I think is a pretty big deal, because you'll be able to enjoy the open world gameplay in free roam with a friend or family member on one console. But that isn't the only way that Mario Kart World is more open than we thought. So something I'd like to point out is Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, was the big cross-gen title that was the big game that Nintendo used to launch the Switch 1 back in March of 2017. And Breath of the Wild was a pretty significant, impactful game. It revolutionized the series of Zelda and perhaps revolutionized how the industry overall looks at open world games and how we should approach them. The way Nintendo described Breath of the Wild was not so much an open world game, even though it is, but more so an open air game. And this term open air had a lot of meaning, but a lot of it had to do with just the extra level of freedom that Breath of the Wild provided within the open world. It's not just about moving around in an environment and going in any direction you choose, but having this greater level of interaction and exploration that you would not have seen in prior open world games. Being able to climb onto every single point of a mountain. Being able to soar through any points of the air that the physics would allow you to reach. Finding nearly an infinite amount of possibilities when it comes to using your different powers and how they interact with the varying physics of the world. And so I bring this up because I think it provides some perspective for how we can look a little bit at Mario Kart World, because this is another big open world game that Nintendo's using to start a generation. And similar to Breath of the Wild, I don't think this open world experience is just about running around or racing around a giant map. There's a bit more to it than that. The level in which we can race around and explore this environment and interact with it is more than your typical game. Which brings me to the tricks and other mechanics of this game, because they do give you other ways to explore this world that are different from prior Mario Kart games. So we've seen with the trick system that you can jump high upwards, not just a little hop, you can dodge left and right, you can also jump onto walls and grind down rails, and you can use this to combo into each other and reach other areas. But this comes back to what I was talking about earlier, how a lot of the footage we've seen at Mario Kart World is with steering assist on, which limits the level of exploration on these tracks. But despite this, we still have seen a variety of different ways you can explore these tracks. Taking a look at this screenshot from the treehouse here, just as an example, we have the main track that we see Mario Kart on, and when you really think about it here, there's actually several different ways you can go. You have the main track, and then you have the rails on the left and right, but you could also jump off to this other side area where there's a ramp that you can use to start flying out. But also you'll notice on this side route that leads to the ramp where you may fly, before that there's actually a green pipe or rail that you perhaps can ride up to as well if you were coming from perhaps the underside. But then we also have where the crowd is at, and this is me speculating on other possibilities. We do not know because we haven't tested it out yet, but could it be possible to drift around on the side above where the crowd is at? Maybe. Because not only do we have this new trick system, but we also have now access to the feather during racing and not just battles. The feather allows you to jump upwards. So what happens when we start to combine our different abilities here? When we use the feather to jump higher upwards, and we're racing on a wall, and then we jump into a grind, like, are there different areas that we could reach that we wouldn't be able to otherwise? And I think the answer to this is absolutely yes. And so, as I look upon Mario Kart World with this in mind, I start to get a little bit of those Breath of the Wild vibes in the sense that I see these different points of interest and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Can I get there? And because of the different mechanics in Mario Kart World, there's a lot of places you may be able to get to that you wouldn't otherwise think you could in any other prior Mario Kart game, or any other kart racing game for that matter. But I think we should also take into account this dynamic world that we are racing in. So we have seen that there is now a day-night cycle, there is a weather system, very similar to Breath of the Wild and a lot of other open world games. But also the environment is more destructible than prior Mario Kart games as well. We've seen that you can break down different light posts, enemies, medians, sidewalls. There's different things that can be broken down. And we've also seen when we're racing through the water, when there's an explosion, this will cause an extra large wave, which changes literally the track that you're racing on. And on that note, let me say that a lot of people have come away from playing Mario Kart World have talked about how when you're racing on the water, it feels very different. It's like a little bit of a wave race light vibe because there is like this movement you constantly are getting by racing upon the waves, even the small waves, not just the big ones caused by explosions. And then also in the air, you have more freedom of movement. There are more ways you can go about exploring as you're flying through the air compared to how it worked in Mario Kart 8 with the gliding. It was more limited and slowed down. And so the ways you can explore in this world and the ways you can interact with this world are far more expansive now. But there's even more to consider here with Mario Kart World. So something that I've seen people say is that this game only has 30 tracks, and that's including the Rainbow Road that has been teased as an unlock once we beat all the other Grand Prix. Let's say that there's only 30 tracks, and I say that with air quotes. I don't think it's fair to say, oh man, this game has even less tracks than prior Mario Kart games at launch, because the last few generations of Mario Kart has started with 32 tracks. But I think that's a very unfair way of looking at it, and it's actually highly misleading. I would not look at these tracks as just tracks, but rather areas, big points of interest. Take a look at this map here. This is the map of Mario Kart World, and sure, it has 29 of the 30 big points of interest because they're not going to show Rainbow Road quite yet. But notice how there's also roads in between all of these different tracks, and if you count them out, it's well over 100. These are all different areas you can race through in either Grand Prix mode or Knockout Tour. And so really, these are all also different tracks that you race through. So if you want to talk about just how much there is to race through in this game, there's actually far more than any other prior Mario Kart game at launch. Now maybe you might want to argue that these areas aren't as sophisticated as the base tracks, and there might be something to that idea. But let's also consider that in most Mario Kart games, most tracks were laps, where you would go through the same circuit 3 times, and then they started to introduce tracks where there were 3 unique sections. Most of Mario Kart World are races in sections, so there's a lot more uniqueness throughout most of the races. And yes, there are Grand Prix and Knockout Tours that will use a big point of interest more than once. One example, DK Spaceport. But these different big tracks in Mario Kart World have been made with a lot more sophistication. They're far more elaborate with far more depth. Because yes, we have that Grand Prix at the end where we go through DK Spaceport. But then we have another entirely different Knockout Tour where you race through Spaceport in a completely different section of that track. And so yes, you are going through the same area, but you're racing through an entirely different part that you did not explore in the Grand Prix mode. And so I don't think it's fair to say that they are repeating or reusing tracks in ways that are kind of cheap. You're simply exploring different angles of these interesting different areas throughout the world of Mario Kart. So there's a lot more to these areas. They're more open than you might have realized. But I do also want to clarify on something here. During Grand Prix mode, during the Knockout Tours, you do not have full access to the open world. You can still drive off course, fall into some sort of pit or area, and Lakitu will pick you up and put you back on the track. So that element of Mario Kart gameplay has not been done away with. And so there are limits, but that's almost maybe a more interesting part to this game, because there are limits, but we're not quite sure what those limits are, which will lead to some experimentation for us to see what exactly we can do and pull off within these tracks. And as I took a look at this, I noticed something interesting between Grand Prix mode and Knockout Tour. They do feel different. So with Grand Prix, from what I can tell, it almost looks like there are more different paths and shortcuts to take as we race through, but in Knockout Tour, it seems like the restrictions on the map are less limited and there are more places you can go, but you might not be finding as many different rails to grind on and such. So it seems like there's going to be a difference in feel between the types of races we're doing in Grand Prix mode versus Knockout Tour. And really what this suggests to me is that there's actually a great deal of thought that has gone into all these different tracks and intermission tracks throughout the entire world. But there's another element to consider here that I think is perhaps mind-blowing if you haven't put it into perspective. This game changes around these areas depending on the race. So at first I noticed these ramps on this side of this mountain that has a track that's winding downwards, but you can cut through it in Knockout Tour through these ramps. Now I haven't confirmed this part, but it looks like these ramps were added, but it got me thinking on how the different tracks can be changed around depending on the mode or race. So going back to Spaceport, we do race through it in different ways depending on the mode. And what's interesting about this is that we do actually see changes to the track. So that giant metal Donkey Kong, during the Grand Prix mode, you see him at the top, but during Knockout Tour, he comes down to the bottom. The chain of events and location of this character are completely different. And this also has me wondering, where is this guy going to be at during free roam mode? Might he be in an entirely different location? Perhaps he might even have some sort of boss fight challenge related to one of the P-switches. That could be. And so we do have evidence that they do change around the tracks depending on the mode here, which actually gives me some hope for something else that people have been skeptical of, and that's mirror mode. So many people seem to be under the agreement that at least with 200cc, it seems likely that it will make a return because 200cc has become commonplace over the recent Mario Kart offerings, but also the tracks are far wider, and so it almost looks like the tracks have been designed with a higher speed in mind. 200cc, from what we can tell, might actually match up better to Mario Kart World than it did with Mario Kart 8. But with mirror mode, people have been skeptical because to do mirror, it might require some substantial changes. And given that we have this continuous open world, some people are skeptical that they'd be able to do that. But as I just discussed, we've already seen evidence that they will make some significant changes depending on the mode you're playing in this game. There is loading between areas. There are changes in between. During the Grand Prix mode, when you're racing through the initial circuit for the Super Mario Bros. Circuit, it is closed off. You cannot access the intermission track. But when you start the next race, the blockades change and you can access the intermission track. So yes, there are different versions of these tracks that they load in depending on the circumstance. So why can't they also do that for mirror mode? They absolutely can. And some people might be confused because some people may be thinking that when you do mirror mode, you are racing the track in reverse, but that's not quite right. It's actually flipping the track, mirroring it. So left turns become right turns become left turns, and we'll see all the different text and signs being in reverse. So I definitely think mirror mode can totally return because we've already seen that they can change around the map significantly. I don't think mirror would really be that much harder to do. So considering this, and also that mirror mode has been a common mode in Mario Kart games for an even longer time than 200cc, I actually think it's more likely that mirror mode is going to make it in, but I'm optimistic we will see both, and I'm hoping that they will also have a mode where you can do 200cc and mirror at the same time, because mirror has only been at 150 in the past. With all that said though, when you really take it all into consideration, there is an incredible amount of potential with Mario Kart World in terms of what we can do. We have seen that there is a great level of attention to detail with these different tracks, and they do change around depending on the situation. There are so many different tracks when you account for all the different intermissions, and also we can race through all these different bigger tracks in different ways from different angles, so they are essentially completely different tracks. So there's a lot of variety there, but also there are so many different possibilities for shortcuts and walls and rails, and we also think about the feather item and other items. There might be a lot more we can do in this game than perhaps any other before. We'll be able to reach places that we never thought possible, which will make the racing all the more interesting and varied. But then we also have a free roam mode that we can do at 60 FPS even with split screen. And this world is far more dynamic than any other, and we likely will see mirror and 200cc return. There's just so much potential with all the different things and all the different ways we'll be able to race throughout this game. But something else I'd like to mention here is the rewind feature that Nintendo announced during the Mario Kart World Direct. I think this is something that people are sleeping on here. One, they confirmed they can use this rewind feature while playing with others. Just when you do this, they will all continue onwards and you are going to fall behind as a result. So there is a drawback there, but by doing this, this will allow you to experiment with doing different things, doing different challenges. They added this for a reason, and I think that reason is because there is so much more you can do in this game. They do want to encourage that sense of curiosity, that sense of adventure and experimentation. Actually, perhaps rather similar to Breath of the Wild, where you want to see just how much you can do with the world, the physics, and everything else going on. And so there's a lot of that I'm seeing here with Mario Kart World. The potential is insane, and when you really think about it all, Mario Kart World is way more open than we thought. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.